Hello and welcome to another video. I know what you're thinking, well, there's a voice. I know, I'm doing a voiceover on this one. So this is the video of what we're doing today. But first, I just want to talk about something. I have been working on a website where I will be offering services, a CGI video, VR, as you typically sort of expect. I'll just talk about CGI, my process of how I deal with clients. If that's something you're interested in, I'll leave the link to all that in the description. I've created a store now where you'll be able to actually purchase these video scenes of the Twinmotion files itself. Let's go through there, what you could potentially learn from it. The prices I think are justified by what you can potentially learn through them. This is what you'll get upon purchase, the actual Twinmotion file and a zip file with all the additional props into it. It's easy enough to navigate and purchase. You can either do it through PayPal or a credit card, and whatever you create the account with the email, that's what it will be sent to after the purchase. These are the scenes currently available. See here, the Council with House I worked on 1 or 2 videos ago. That's now available as well. So before I kickstart actually into the video, the top left here, you'll see, I have that there because I got a PC and I like to see what it's running at. So this is the new PC that I got. It was cost quite a bit. It's the 40 series, the latest 14th gen Intel. I know what people are saying, oh my god, people don't like the 14th gen because of some of the hiccups it had earlier on when it first came out, but a lot of that has been solved nowadays, and I have been really pushing it to the limits, and it's handled everything fine, and which helps a lot when it comes to this CGI in general and this whole Twinmotion process. So I didn't know how to approach this video, to be honest. I think what I'm going to do is, I've wrote down a couple of notes, and I'm just going to go over one of the most common questions that I get asked recently is what is photorealism? Like, how do I even achieve photorealism into emotion? But in order to achieve photorealism, it's basically creating a realistic photo, I guess, because that's basically what a still CGI is. It's a photo pretty much. You might as well say that. How do you go about achieving that? So I've broken it down into layers, and I think one of the most important points is just understanding lighting. If your lighting isn't, if it creates, obviously you kind of have dark scenes, but at the end of the day, if it's a sci-fi fantasy scene, I suppose you can have it dark, but if you're working, say, on a client's project or something, they don't want a house that's in dark. So lighting always really helps, and understanding Kelvin, especially if it's artificial lighting, in interior shots, understanding the different room Kelvins helps a lot with that. But particular exterior shots, depending on what type of feel you want, if you want it to be more colder or warmer, will be the difference on if you're going for something like 5,500 to 8,500, depending on the time of day, of course. And obviously lighting, this helps as well. Of the brighter the scene is, the more details can pop out. And quality textures, that's the next one. I don't really use the native Twinmotion materials. I think they lowered it in at 2K, which is okay. It's not great. So I tend to just use the default mega scan ones that are in there already, which are decent enough. They're 4K, but you can actually just go on the quick mega scans and get up to 16K. I think even more than that, which is just overkill, to be honest, for most people's use cases. Really, you want to what's closest to the scene. You don't have to, but it improves the realism on going for more 8K there in the in the distance, the mid ground, you go for more 4K. In the background, you can reduce it to 2K. But you can just do it all at 4K. That is more than enough quality for most cases. I hardly ever use 8K unless it's a very specific thing that needs really good quality. Detailed, high poly vegetation. Well, detailed texture in general, obviously, but detailed, high poly vegetation really just helps out that greenery look, of which I only use some of the more recent Twinmotion trees that they brought in. I use the Megascan plants because they're pretty high poly. I use the Max Tree ones because they're very high poly and they look amazing. The Max Tree now actually has a native Twinmotion file, so you can literally just drag and drop it in and save it to your user library. It's very simple now, which is good. Here we go. Next one. Not too perfect. I've written down is what I mean by that is the actual if you're working on a client's project, you want that to, of course, be as perfect as possible. But realistically, we don't live in a perfect world. There's always human error at some level, and these for us can come in as decals or grunge in the Twinmotion settings, material settings, but it could be a decal or a bump map where we've got, you know, dead leaves, bits of twigs, cracks, sometimes in the wall maybe, a little bit of drizzle of leaking water, maybe even a little bit of rust sometimes if you've got a metallic scene. There's many different, well, if you just go on the mega scans, obviously there's plenty. It could be potholes. Obviously, I live in England, so potholes is quite a common one. To be honest, I think that's just throughout England in general. So yeah, and the best way I suppose of helping train that is just literally go outside and just take a picture of how your local roads look and bits of detailing on walls. Get real world examples. It's right there in front of your eyes. If you listen to this video now, you have internet connection, you can just go to, well, you can just use Google Maps and explore different scenes, cities, depending on what type of environment you're going for. Go on the street view and literally just explore real examples, and try and bring that into your scenes. Variation, random variation, again what I'm talking about with it, not to create anything too perfect. Of course, if you're using materials that are more tile based, mosaic and stuff like that, it's harder. You can't really use the Twinmotion randomizer on that. It doesn't really make sense because it has a pattern to it. It's not supposed to be random. However, with stuff like concrete, the grass, bits of stuff like that, even sometimes using flagstones, depending on how much you scale it, and you can get away with it sometimes even with that. Compositioning is really helps with the selling shot, already setting up at the start of a scene, how you want the image to be portrayed by the eye as soon as you go in. Rule of thirds, of course, the photography basics. You want your the viewer's eye to focus on the main subject and not too much of everything else. So you go for the more detail, I suppose, well, in the middle, and you'll see a very snip it towards the end of this video, because I realised, well, I didn't actually do the composition. I knew, just because I've created so many scenes, I already have an eye for it, of how it, you'll see I only move it up a smidge little bit, just because it wasn't perfectly aligned with the rule of thirds. So compositioning always really helps. I have that parallelism. I can't really say it. What's it called? The parallelism. you know what I mean. I can't say it right now. That helps just flatten the sort of image, so you're not looking at it from a downward shifted point of view. You're looking at it as a straight. Yeah, with the lighting, also with the export settings, understanding the path tracing settings, using path tracer is literally like, it is the magic button in Twinmotion. If you wonder why my voice sounds a bit off, I'm a bit ill, to be honest. But yeah, so of course path tracing is the most realistic way for light to calculate in a scene. Obviously we do have Lumen, which is great, especially for just fast video exports. But for still images and pretty fast, not very long videos, path tracing can be okay, as long as the samples aren't too high, because it can take a ridiculous amount of times, depending on if you're going for 30 or 60 frames. But the best way, I suppose, to learn about this is literally just to play around with the image size with the pixels, mess around with the aspect ratios, depending on what type of image you want to go for, and just set up like 8 different or 12 different images as duplicate it, and then just adjust the path tracing, the fireflies, the bounce rate, denoiser on or off, and just play around with them different values and export it all at once. Name them accordingly so you know what you're looking at, and just flick through them and see how those settings affect or play out on the actual export render. It's one of the fastest ways to sort of learn about understanding lighting and how your lighting and how your scene is portrayed at the final point through the export settings. So of course, the more samples you have, the more it's literally sampling, calculating the image, the pixel by pixel, the bounce rate. So the higher you have it, the less artifacts you tend to have. But sometimes if you go overkill, you can make it not seem as realistic. And this is another point with the denoiser of having it on and off, is because someone did recently ask me about it, of, you know, what is the difference? Denoiser, in the name, it denoises the image, which is good and bad. It's good because it reduces the export time. It's good because it makes your image look smoother. But I tend to mainly use it if I do use it, I tend to use it in interior scenes. But if you do want the more gritty, I suppose, type of look, which tends to be more realistic, especially if you've got high quality textures, you're better off getting all of that texture as clear as possible with just having it off and increasing the export time realistically by upping the samples and bounce rate, so that it doesn't create those sort of artifacts and noise. Well, not as much artifacts, and reduces the noise. That's effectively what it does. Is when you tip it on, it just denoises the noise, but it can lose the detail. So it's, as I say, it swings and roundabouts. It's use it to your advantage. And the best way, I suppose, to learn that is do 2 of them in your scene with not very high bounce or sample rates, and you'll be able to see, you know, roughly if it's right to use it or not. But pretty much all the time, I only use denoise in interiors. I hardly ever use it for exteriors. I suppose another way of learning photorealism is by following people that are good at photorealism. I'd say, you know, I've come on quite a bit over this past year, just through trial and error. of just constantly and consistently just I keep saying just favorite word, playing around and creating scenes. The best way of learning is by practice. It really is just that. And some of the best ways that you can learn is by following people that are good at it. I know you've got a couple of YouTube channels. I don't know too many of them. I know John Creation and Twinmotion Guru. Twinmotion Guru covers quite a bit. John Creation, he hasn't loaded too much, but the stuff that he has got on is really good. And if you are quite invested in Twinmotion, you might as well be in the Facebook group, because there's a lot of helpful people in there, and you can see a lot of the settings that people use. There is a particular guy in there called Lasher. He's there's a few that are really good. He's one of the few that are very exceptional. And you just analyze what their render is, and nothing that they do is out of your, unless you're running a system to where you can't press path tracer, you're still able to replicate exactly what the rest of these people are able to do. It's not impossible. It's just understanding the layering systems and placement of objects and materials and textures and detail, high poly, low poly, when to use stuff, compositioning, lighting, export settings. It's pretty much all it is. I suppose that brings to the next one, is HDRIs. Use them to your advantage. You can set it to where you have it as the background as a sky dome, or you can I forgot what it's called now. Use it as a sky dome, or you can have it as the background. I tend to just have it, some of them I've used as a sky dome, because you can manipulate the pixels in it. I mean, one of them, or a couple of actually I didn't make a video of that. I created an interior of a desk, and there was a sea townscape in the background, and if I just added that as the background, I would have it wouldn't really make sense, because it would just be a bunch of pixels in the background pretty much, but you get the lighting. But if I add it as a sky dome, I can manipulate the height of it, the intensity, the tilt angle, etc., to where I could make it as if to where the scene looked as if it was part, like, in that sky dome. And because the sky domes are, this was one that was already in the Twinmotion, so it's high poly anyway. High poly. It was a high. I can't get my words out to that. It was a high detailed HDRI, so on the export it looked very good, but it wasn't in the scene. Like, it wasn't, props or anything. It was literally just the HDRI. So manipulate the HDRIs to your advantage if you can. Polyhaven is a great site of, it's got loads of different HDRIs that you can use. What's the next one? Yeah, I suppose that's another one, is every scene is unique. Different settings. I do tend to use quite similar settings for the exteriors, but the interiors in particular, because you'll have different light sources coming from different angles, and certain places can't get certain lighting, so you have to up the bounce rates for certain scenes compared to others. And again, the more scenes you do, the more you'll sort of automatically kind of know roughly how many samples and bounces, fireflies, etc. that you need. Prop manipulation. Twinmotion, of course, has Sketchfab and Vegascans. These are great. Size them, rescale them, angle them. And that's it as well. That comes into the next part, is scene size. If you're only doing a still image, really you should only just do whatever the final export render is going to calculate and see from the viewport. There's no point in doing a 2,000 trees off in the distance that you're just not going to see. Just do what's in front of you, essentially. And as you can see on the video, I'm doing, a little bit of a surrounding, so when the video, when the house is on the video, the glass reflection, it's still got something that's reflecting, rather than it just being an horizon with no detail. I always as well have the little pop out window, as you see to the bottom right. This is great for just understanding, what's actually in that image. Is it actually affecting anything, or is it kind of useless? Then I just don't use it if I'm not going to see it. So yeah, but if you're doing a video, again, only do what you're going to see. But if you're doing a full 360, you have to go into more detail, because it's going to see those horizon points that are just blank canvases, basically. You don't want that, because then that just completely it just doesn't look as realistic, especially if you're going for that look. So yeah, with 360, like facade rotations, etc., around the house and whatever, you are going to have to put a lot more detail into that. But again, just only focus on the focal points of the main front, the forefront. Don't go as in detail with the background. You also don't want to go into more detail in the background one, because you're just going to guide the viewer's attention to it, and that isn't the idea. The idea is to get the viewer to look at what you're doing and what the project is. So only do what's necessary, basically. Otherwise you're kind of wasting your time. And depending on how much in the rendering output settings, if you do the viewport reflections to extra, to low, medium, high, then you're just exporting your rendering, you're just increasing your exporting rendering time. That's what I've been to the last point, I suppose, really, which is well, it's easy to say now that I've got one, but I've been using Twinmotion for quite a while, since pretty much near enough the first releases of it when I was first at uni, and it's come a long way. It was only this past year that I've been able to press the path tracing button. It really is the magic button. You can make your scenes as good as you want, but without being able to press path tracing or have access, at least the lumen, the photorealism dips, it really does. So really is the selling point of calculating the light, and that really is the difference of how the scene gets portrayed in the final output. So I'd say invest in a good system that's going to last you, because it will end up paying dividends back. Wow. Because one of the reasons is because of real time. Well, as you see towards the end, I do like a quick sort of just like video of walking, like gliding through to the front, and I do it with path tracer with everything enabled, and I'm able to see it still, even then, how roughly, with a good eye, how it's going to look in that final render. And also when you're just moving around, say real time, you can have path tracer on it, you can see how the light is reflecting and bouncing off stuff at quite a low. I still, I only use the final, I only up the samples and bounce rates on the final one. You don't really need to do it before. I just use like 64 samples and 8, even that's still right, of bounces with Denoiser off just to see what the image looks like but without that, and that can really tell you the difference of how the lighting is being portrayed in your image, and that can sometimes be the difference of if you're exporting 3 or 5 times or before you eventually get it right, and that the export times, like if you don't have a good system, adds up. I know, because my old system that I had, for the typical type of scene that I do now, it would have took me probably about 4 hours, and nowadays, with this, I can do it in about 5 minutes, which isn't to brag, it's simply to the fact of it just helps, it saves so much time. So if you are fortunate enough to where you can invest in a good system, it's worth it. But it's worth it. It will give you the confidence to be able to experiment a lot more and faster with more efficiency, which means you can learn faster. I suppose in some way I'm kind of being hypocritical here because I learned this much already, but even though I've been using Twinmotion pretty much since the start of it first coming out, there was a huge leap between, my first ones to what I'm up to now. And well, I've had 2 laptops in between that. One was one where it was pretty much MX250, might as well be a 1080 graphics card pretty much, and then I went up to a 2080, but that was good, that enabled me still to be able to practice a lot more and really refine. When I with the 4080, Super, I'm able to just really save a lot of time, real time, when progressing through. And I suppose that's another one is photorealism is layering. Like it's literally layers of stuff. As you've seen through this video, it is layers of detail piled on each other that helps get that realism. So here it's part of a kit bash. They're quite good assets, the props, to be fair. I was just looking through. Well, I felt like it was missing something in the scene, so I thought I'll just try them at the entrances, which is okay. You see in a minute, a bit later on. I tried like a Victorian street light, and it just didn't fit the scene, so they got deleted. But again, this is something that you could imagine to be there. Just trying to add, again, more layers of detail. It always helps. I was quite annoyed at myself but I kind of didn't expect as much detail as what I went into with a cyber scene that I did with a recent shorts video. That had so many layers of detail. But anyway, with this, you see in a minute, this is. I was like, okay, so this is how it's brought it in. So then I had to change it to just select the object that's in there and put the lights on as individually, just drag and drop, and then that brought it automatically because of that, because it was the same material. And then and then as you see, it's like, this is kind of lame, don't really like it. There you go. And that's this sort of structure that I have. Of the files is pretty much what I always have. I always have the model, the background, the detail, and the vegetation. And the street lights are part of the detail. Detail is basically the layering, and decals add up quite a lot of that. And the vegetation just helps really set that realism apart with the greenery. It just always really helps with that. Here I'm just trying to create a path of but here you'll also see path trace enabled, roughly how it's going to look. if I don't have Path Tracer enabled right there, it just kind of doesn't really, it just doesn't look that nice. So yeah, there's not too much else really to talk about. Those are the main sort of tips, I guess, for achieving photorealism. All those layering of points that I've mentioned. It's certainly, I used to look at certain renders, especially done by V-Ray or Corona, some in Blender, and just think like, wow, it looks real. How is that even possible to do that? I used to think that, and then you break it down into individual elements, and you just realise actually, okay, it's fundamentals of certain stuff, and it's manipulation stuff, and that's that. And so this was just a very quick, just for the video, and these are the final renders of a sunny one and that. But anyway, so this is the final video, the final part. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.